videographer. I'm based in London, and at the moment I'm in Chicago, and I'm doing a show called Hidden in Plain Sight at the Vertical Gallery with my friend Patrick. I started off doing street art probably 15 years ago. I came back from San Francisco and I got the bug. I saw a lot of stencils that were happening around London by people like Bass, Banksy, Fail, Ico, and it was just an inspiration for me. After having seen a lot of graffiti in San Francisco, I just started going out painting a bunny character. Bunny character takes me about that long to do. If I'm in a rush, I can do it in about 5 seconds, and then I'm gone, like a phantom. And I've expanded this bunny tag into a whole collection of images called the Nightmare series. These are basically crying people, and so that's been my my basis of my work for the last 10 years, I would say. And then I'm also exploring signs at the moment, going out and finding road signs and changing the meaning of those. They seem to be like ready-made pop art, which also references street and references street art. So now I'm doing signs, changing them, painting on them, and taking them outside as well. At the moment I've just finished a series of little small dog poop signs with Donald Trump on them, so tonight we're taking those out and doing what's known as a street drop. I think if you're in the city, you have a responsibility to go out and do your quota of street art. If you're a street artist, it kind of goes with the territory, and the clue is in the name. I did an image of Liz Taylor because I've been reading a lot about her relationship with Richard Burton. I've always been attracted to people like Liz who were a little bit crazy and a little bit passionate. A lot of my relationships that I've had have been similar to that, so I could see the fact that Richard was from Wales and I was from Wales, and we've both been sort of seduced by these beautiful women who were very exotic. I could kind of understand that. So the first portrait I did was inspired by Liz Taylor. I did a crying Liz Taylor, and she went and died. About 2 months later on, she passed away. And so this crying image of Liz Taylor kind of became very popular. So the 2 different colorways that I had, they both sold out. And I'd received an email from a copy village in China, and they had referenced Liz Taylor and Jackie Kennedy when they offered to make any art that I wanted. So the next one that I did was a Jackie Kennedy looking at Andy Warhol, and looking at the email, which was a 64 by 64 pixel image of a Jackie and a Liz. It interested me because I think when we're looking at art these days, the new artists that we find are usually artists that we find in Instagram, on Twitter, and they're usually small JPEGs. So it was something that I found very current. I think the whole thing about street art is it's come at this sort of perfect storm time where you've got Instagram, you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook. These are the places where you find new art, and these are the places that street artists have found to use to promote their work. This morning I woke up and someone emailed me a link to a piece that Roa, a great street artist, is doing in Mexico City this morning. And in the 60s you wouldn't have had the internet. If Leo Castelli wanted to sell a piece of artwork, he'd have to send a physical slide to the collector. 2 weeks later on, he'd get that slide back, and then he could send it to someone else. But now, if we're making art in Mexico, or if I'm doing a show in Chicago, that goes out to 1,000 or 10,000, or your piece goes viral and 2 million people look at it in 2 days. It's changed the whole way that art is distributed, and also art is made. People make art on the street and then they think about how it's going to format when they get it onto Instagram. They're not so worried about it getting painted over or taken away or destroyed, because if you've got the photograph and you've got it on Instagram, then you're pretty much sorted. Let's look at three different artists. Let's look at an emerging artist. Let's look at someone who's, reasonably established, and let's look at someone who's doing mega shows in Chicago. So, sort of Murakami is doing a mega show in Chicago, but he can assume that the Instagram is going to be full of people taking photographs of his work and posting them up. So I'm sure he's not spending a lot of time on his Instagram account going, please come and see my show. Someone like Daniel Arsham has got a huge following on Instagram. He does post up a lot of his work on there, and he probably gets a lot of inspiration, and he's able to distribute his work quite well. He's also doing gallery shows. And then you've got someone who's just doing their first stencils, and they're hoping that they'll do a few street pieces and then they'll be able to sell a lot of their prints. They're probably spending, I would say, 80% of their time posting up online and trying to get their work out there, which is quite crazy, really. I think a lot of people who are now coming up are reading articles about how important it is to, distribute their work and get it out there on Instagram. There has to be some sort of balance between it, and I think it's important, but then I think it's also important just to turn everything off and just create and just make art. When I used to make street art, I used to have to go home afterwards, wash my hands, put on a different jacket, go out, take a photograph of it, and document it. Now, I don't have to bother, because I'll do a piece of street art and someone's documenting it and taking a photograph of it, probably before it's even finished. I've got friends of mine who get really frustrated. They're on the street in Brick Lane making a piece, and there are people standing behind them, and he has to turn to them and say, look, I haven't even finished this, it looks rubbish now, can you just wait until I'm actually done? But then the fact that there are fans and there are people documenting it and blogging it and videoing it and flying drones around it and taking photographs of it is fine. It just reflects that people care about this art movement, and I think there is a generation of kids, for them, this is their art movement. I've seen that in galleries, where you have a kid coming out of a gallery with their dad, and they turn the corner and they see a Banksy and they go, that's a Banksy, that's my favourite artist. They've probably been exposed to Modigliani and Picasso and all of these artworks in gold frames in the museum that they're supposed to really care about, but they care about a Banksy. I think people are now actually formatting their work because they know that it's going to have to look good on Instagram. But then I think there are also people completely disregarding that, who just anti that whole thing. Let's look at graffiti artists. Graffiti artists, had books with photographs of their work, and now you have graffiti artists who are promoting their work online, which is dangerous for them because they don't want to promote their work to the point where they're going to sort of entrap themselves by showing themselves painting a train and doing illegal pieces. I know friends of mine who've actually been arrested and spent time in prison because they've been tracked through their mobile phones. And so, we're talking about this whole thing of you're promoting yourself on social media, but you don't want to entrap yourself by publicly, letting people know where you are. I'm a pretty morbid guy sometimes, and someone has pointed out that mainly I'm doing portraits of dead people. I'm really interested in just an era that's been kind of lost. This era that, Liz Taylor is a good example of, this glamorous image of the silver screen that we were kind of given. But I'm kind of looking beneath the surface, I'm kind of scratching the surface of this veneer and sort of looking beneath that. And I think if you scratch the surface, there is this sort of darkness to people's lives. And I think also if we scratch the surface of our own lives, you find the same thing. You know, that there are certain things that, you know, that are private, and there is a darkness to, you know, to people's lives. Yeah, I had an artist who was doing some subject matter that I found a bit offensive. It was all about like child murders and stuff like that, and I thought that was pretty disgusting. You know, I know people who collect art made by serial killers, and I just think that's just a little bit disgusting. So that's just somewhere that I wouldn't go. Let's say, for example, I've done a portrait and a series of pieces about Sharon Tate, and she was murdered by the Manson family, but I choose to focus on the positivity and the fact that I believe that angels never die. I do actually believe that there isn't really a death. I think when you pass away, you just pass over someone else, and you have a life beyond this life. And so I'm sort of, in a way, I'm trying to sort of keep her memory alive. And I've used the phrase, angels never die. Usually there's different levels of the meaning of some of these phrases. I think when Marlene Dietrich had her funeral, someone put flowers on her grave, and that said that phrase. So, you know, I'll find something from something that I've read, put it into the back of my mind, and then rejig that as a phrase. You know, when you're doing graffiti, there's usually, you know, a name, and then there's something like a little phrase that goes along it. So I'm always interested in recycling these sound bites and reusing words. Probably the reason why I'm enjoying using road signs right now is that they have this sort of message that they're trying to give you, you know, through all of the advertising and all of the road signs. There's usually a slogan, or there's usually something like "Enjoy Coke," or you know, official motor of the world's finest cars. They're trying to sell you something, just as I'm trying to sell you something through my art. I'm trying to sell a painting at the end of the day, or get an idea across, or change people's minds. I think the fact that street art is probably the biggest art movement of this century is fascinating. When you go to the Pompidou Centre, you have the book section, and you have the surrealist section, you have the cubist section, you have the impressionist section, and you have the street art section. Now, I might be naive, but that's a way of me understanding that street art is probably a movement, and it's probably a movement that's not going to go away anytime soon. So I see that it's growing and it's expanding. I see the fact that advertisers want to use it to sell their product as a slightly, you know, annoying thing, but it's natural. When you had skateboarding, and skateboarding was becoming part of, in the public consciousness, skateboarding was used for advertising in the same way that we see car ads with street art. So it's just one of those things. Well, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about the movement of street art into the permanent collections of the art institutes, and it's something that's happened already. You've got a permanent street art section in the Victoria and Albert Museum, so you can go to their reading room and you can say, right, okay, what Banksys do you have in the permanent collection? So it has been accepted into some collections of some of the major, you know, art museums, archives, and those pieces will stay in those archives. They're not able to be reacquisitioned or sold. So I find that as sort of a vindication of what a lot of us believe, that it is an important art movement. It probably comes because at some point people look at those pieces and go, oh, they're valuable pieces now, not just that we think it's really cool and we get a feeling of euphoria from it. But say, for example, if you would look at a piece by Futura that was painted at a Clash concert in the 80s in New York, I feel that that is as significant as maybe the pyramids. It's a significant object of a specific time. And so, these are important pieces that are being made over the last 30 years, and I think it's significant. I think its significance will grow as time goes on, and also as the older guard of these art galleries and museums pass on. I think the younger generation, who are probably not so resistant to allowing the barbarians from entering the white holy tower of the art citadel, I think that's something that's going to happen. I mean, now I definitely feel like we are the barbarians at the gate, but I think that at some point, we will be allowed in, or we'll just break our way in. What's happening now is a lot of artists are actually creating their own galleries and creating their own media, and the actual galleries that are showing these pieces are galleries that have been created specifically for this movement, rather than a gallery that specialises in surrealism suddenly going, actually, I like street art, although that is happening as well. There's a gallery in San Francisco that has a big background in supporting dead surrealist artists, but they're also interested in living street artists. I think street art's exactly where it should be at the moment. I think it's at that point where the Rolling Stones were when they were doing little small gigs and they were hungry. It hasn't got to that bloated sort of stadium rock kind of time. I think it still feels inclusive, and I think there is a new generation of artists making great new art, and finding a lot of great artists who are creating new stuff. And in the same way that we draw analogies with skateboarding, wherever you go around the world, you have a family. If you're a street artist and you show up in Sao Paulo, you probably will meet someone who knows someone that you know. So there are all these sorts of networked connections, and that means that if you're showing with different galleries and working with different artists, there's a lot of information that you can kind of get about this gallery's great, you should work with them, this network's here, those people are cool, you should go and meet them. So I think because of that network, I think things are strong and things are growing and things are interesting. It hasn't got to that stage where we're all making loads of money. It's got to that stage where we're just working hard to be able to do what we do, and people who are working hard, there's certain rewards where we're able to travel and visit new places and paint on walls. So yeah, I think it's at a good stage right now. I think I did a piece that probably wasn't that well received. It was a pastiche of the Death and Disaster series, but it was basically Lady Diana's car, done in a Death and Disaster series way. And some people who've seen that have gone, ooh, that's harsh. But I think as an artist, you're supposed to push things, and I suppose sometimes you go too far. But if you look at, say, for example, and this is no comparison between me and him, Picasso's Demoiselle d'Avignon, when he painted that, Matisse was, a bit astonished. A lot of his collectors were quite astonished. He found it very hard to sell that piece. He made endless revisions to it. it ended up sort of facing the wall in his gallery, in his atelier in Paris, and for a long time it wasn't, well received. But I think sometimes when you're ahead of things, you can't always have an instant reception for the pieces that you do. But then later on, people go, actually, I can see that that was an important piece. So, I think if you screw up and you make a mistake, you learn from those mistakes again. I think if you fail again, and you fail better. I think sometimes there's a phenomenon which I call Banksy's children, where people see the incredible success of Banksy and they think that they can just replicate that. I don't think you can. I don't think there's more than one Banksy out there. So I think the most important thing is to be original. We don't need another Banksy, we need another artist that's just coming out of the blue, that's just going to absolutely, blow us away with their originality. I mean, I look at artists, people like Os and Connor Harrington, and I look at them and it makes me want to be a better artist. And I don't just look at street art, I look at modern art, and I look at movies, and I read books, and I'm always absorbing and trying to be a better artist every single day. You go to the opening at the Murakami exhibition in Chicago and look at it and go, I could never do that. But then you realise, well, he's got 100 assistants helping him to do that. So when you break it down to what he's actually doing, it's not actually that complicated. It's just the multiplication of what he's doing and his ideas that makes it so good. So it can be daunting to look at stuff like that. But then I think you look at the first pieces that he was doing, and they're pretty rubbish. You look at pieces 5 years later, they're getting better, and they're getting better, and they're getting better. So everyone has this path of improvement. So don't be daunted. I think you just got to be hungry and just smash it. The next show I'd like to do is going to bounce off from this show, and the things that I've learned from doing this will teach me, and I'll make sure that the next show is better and more visually pleasing, and hopefully I'll do even more for the next show. But I think every show has to be a step up to the next level, otherwise what's the point? If you're just reproducing a successful formula, it just becomes boring. So you've got to challenge yourself and not be afraid to make mistakes. And hopefully that will take things to the next level. I've seen artists who've done a show which hasn't been well received because people just go, wait a minute, he was doing that stuff, or she was doing this stuff, and they've gone somewhere completely different. But I think that's important, and I think that's the job of an artist, is not to follow the well-trodden path. It's just sometimes, veer off and go off on a tangent and just see where it takes you.